past, which Mr. Ali mentioned as Soneti Chidiya. I think if we talk about the East India Company, for the good reasons which they represented, it used to be a trading company. And they were willing to go to any part in the world to trade and to source whatever they could at the best prices. So if you look at the history of the history of the world has been revolving around the trade, of course, marketing, finance, etc. They, in my view, are the add-ons. And I think in today's session, we have
no brand positioning, and as somebody alluded to, low levels of innovation, we will continue to be a commodity player. And you're right, over a period of time, as incomes increase, India becomes, let's say, a $7,000-8,000 per capita country. Consumption levels would be such that we won't be able to probably match the domestic requirements, and we would turn a net importer of commodities. But again, going back, I think value appropriation. How do you do value appropriation? You have to be a commodity importer rather than a processed product importer, and you have to be a processed product exporter. And that's how you will ensure that sufficient value is there and there is a trade surplus which we will maintain. So we would probably get into more exotic product exports, more value-added products, more innovative products, and we have all the endowments for that, sufficient land, a huge population, which will help us in doing value addition. But we have to position ourselves like that. So look at China today. China has, traversed that path, and they are still net exporters. And how have they done? They would import a lot of commodities, very little processed products, and they convert that even for their domestic production consumption. They add value inland, and for exports, they rely more and more on value-added product exports. Look at their strategic reserves of commodities. They create those strategic reserves to create the right kind of political stability in the country. So they would import all the commodities, play with those, create those strategic reserves. They are not bothered about those commodity imports at all. They are happy. So if you were to look at those only commodity-oriented ITC HSN codes, they would be net importers. But on an overall basis, they are net exporters. And that's the way to go.
Thank you, Mr. Sanjay, for your views. As rightly said by him, that today China has been sitting on huge stocks. If you look at most of the commodities like soybean, wheat, etc., I think out of the total global stocks, more than 50% stock.
So when we talk about exports, most of the transactions happen in US dollars. So when we talk about exports, most of the transaction happens in US dollars. So is it something? Is it a threat? Do you consider it a threat or an opportunity for innovation, or something that should stay as it is? So I wanted to get an opinion on that.
See, I'll again go back to Sanjay's speech. It's all about how you position as yourself as a country. When US dollar, obviously it continues to dominate all the currencies, but whenever required, we have got into transactions with Iran, where we have traded with Iran on one-on-one basis. Today, we are in a position to trade with Russia also on one-on-one basis, and that's something which the government is likely to take the right actions as and when required. And over the period of time, I see the US dominance and the US currency dominance going down. That's my personal view.
See this, the whole US dollar thing, it has multiple dimensions. So threat is something which happens over a period of time in future. It's not a threat actually, it's a drain. It's a drain on all economies. This whole over-reliance on US dollar, and it has economic and geopolitical dimensions. So I'll not talk about everything, but US benefits so much because of that at the cost of rest of the countries. So that's the current situation, and it's a drain. I'm saying that it's not a threat. It is something which is already materialized, and all of us sitting here pay for that because they can keep dollar at whatever is their convenient value, and the terms of trade and the value for their domestic society is determined by that. Right? They are able to export pollution. They are able to get imports cheaper. Exports are more expensive, and there is a whole economy in New York and their financial centers, which is in terms of dollar management, it leads to job creation. We can go on and on. Now, we have to move away from that. But how do you move away? You have to create what they have created over a period of time. You have to have solidity in the country, your governance structures, your military strength, your economic strength, your soft power. Dollar is a reflection of all these things. A country's solidity and attractiveness and reliability and credibility in the eyes of the world. For that to happen, it will take us decades. So over the last 7-8 years, also that whole shift from dollar away to other currencies is actually not significant. And with the geopolitics, the way they have played out in the last 4 years, look at it from anybody's perspective. People still do not have a viable alternative. Look at euro, look at pound, look at renminbi. Are they reliable for anybody else? You still, if you have to trade with Russia also, Russia is also thinking that how do I do a rupee ruble trade? What do I do with those rupees? So you need to build lot of solidity and you will be a very attractive country for people, for you to move. So it is desirable. It's not a threat. It is something which we are already covering. Threat is something in the future. So this for the years, last few decades, we are paying through our nose for that. We don't realize all that. But if somebody were to quantify that, it will just lead to a lot of agony in our lives.
Thank you, Mr. Sanjay. And just to add on to that, if we talk about SAR, India can probably have a common currency for this particular region. And once that is successful, because if you must have been reading as to what has happened in Sri Lanka. So let's say Sri Lanka has their currency, which is probably 10 million rupees. That might be boon for Sri Lankans and likewise for the Nepalese, for the Bangladeshis, and etc. Because if you look at the forest reserves of most of the countries, they are probably in a very bad shape. So that's something which can be a good starting point. But as Mr. Sanjay said, that it is not going to happen in a year or in 5 years or in 10 years. It's a long process. Next question, please.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Aditi from the batch of 23. Sir, all of you talked about streamlining our supply chain according to the global standards and also reduction of the logistics cost, which is also the aim of the national logistics policy, which has been rolled out by the government of India. So, sir, I wanted to know about its feasibility and the implementation of the national logistics policy of reducing our logistics cost, which is around 15% to less than to a single digit of around 8 to 9%. Seeing lot of constraints in the documentation that requires a lot of hassle, integrating it into a single platform with the help of digitization. How do you see India implementing it by the year 2030 as the goal of NLP is?
Thank you, Mr. Sunil. You will probably like to answer that question, please.
I think India has the potential to bring down the logistics cost because in the Desh bill, one of the things that they're trying to address is digitization of the entire process. And while drafting the rules, also, we are, as a committee, we'll be looking at various risk management systems that we should be looking at monitoring only those areas where there is an issue of a risk. For example, there is a lot of product inside the zones which are imported for the purpose of re-export. Now, we don't have to be doing the same customs risk procedures for imports for the sake of exports, but we need to have a different procedure for risk management when those products are going into the domestic tariff area. So we need to be judiciously using our resources and our technology for areas where we can bring down our costs. Today, our procedures are actually very cumbersome, and we need to simplify a lot of these procedures. So I think we do have the potential, and by 2030, we will definitely get down there where our logistics cost will be in the 7 to 8% global practice range.
Thank you, Mr. Sunil. Maybe Mr. Pranav will also like to add on to it.
Yeah, I think Surya has rightly described, that there are challenges which are there. So, few things I think which is very important. So, it is at the policy level, but when we say implementation, there are a lot of things which is to be done in terms of infrastructure, in terms of the equipment, handling equipment, in terms of rail networks, in terms of road networks. So, because these are the lifelines. So, logistics policy itself per se is in terms of a document which is basically talks about bringing down the cost. But how actually on ground it will come, it will be a matter of the change which is required in the infrastructure. You have seen DFC now, dedicated freight corridor coming in place. So, see, all those things, they are in the pipelines. When we say 2030, definitely, as I said, that in my, earlier also I talked about that there was no such department. Different than 10 years back. So all these infrastructure changes which are going to happen, which is happening, will definitely, bring down substantially the logistic cost per traffic. Thank you.
Next question, please.
Good afternoon, esteemed panel members. I'm Ashish Pandey. My question is on agri exports. So one of the major challenges I feel is the small land holding size.
Yes, land size in India is much smaller if you compare with larger countries, even Latin American countries. I definitely agree to it. But what I also, please understand that when we're talking about agri exports, we're not talking agri exports per farmer as of now, unless we're talking about the traceability aspects. Okay. So when we talk about exports, agri exports, we basically look at the aggregation model. So a lot of farmers, etc., they bring the produce to either a collective from where farmer collective companies collected, or they bring it to a mandi level, from where again the companies like Olam, Cargill, etc. So that is why the agri exports, the aggregation model works very well. Number two, you spoke about the usage of AI technology, IoT devices, etc. Fortunately, these technologies have also evolved. Loan from anybody. So those records will be all, all in sync with the revenue records for a particular year. So all these things are possible. There are devices like people are using IoT devices to switch on their pumps, the water pumps in the morning. So the farmer nowadays doesn't have to go to the farm field, which is 3 kilometers or 5 kilometers away from his house. From the convenience of his mobile phone, the smartphone, in the morning he switches on his motors. Number one. Number two, he also looks at that device is also so much enabled that if he wants to water his fields for, let's say, when the water is standing just 1 inch, so the water will be like he can put those settings and he can, switch off his motor. People are, there are companies like tractor companies which are making sure that the driverless tractors, the person doesn't even need to settle. Of course, these things are still being tried out. But what I would say is that, it's more of aggregation and it's more of, bringing down to retail, which is being worked out.
Thank you, Mr. Mandal. I think with all what NCDEX has been doing on the ground, Mr. Ali will also like to add.
Yeah, thanks. Just to add to a couple of points, I don't think it's a issue. If you look at the whole Southeast Asia, the survival of smallholders is a lot.
Now, I have worked with United Breweries for 2 years in the past, which is basically the Kingfisher beer. Now, there we used to buy 3 lakh tons of barley annually. That was our annual consumption of barley to convert it into malt and then malt into beer. So there, out of that, 110 to 120 lakh, no, 1.2 lakh to 1.3 lakh tons used to come from contract farming. So wherein all the farmers had accumulated their land and they were all happy to supply to United States. So contract farming has also helped farmers in terms of accumulating their small scale lands into converting them into a large scale to get the better efficiencies out of them.
Mrs. Sunil will also
Yeah,
like to
I
add
just
in.
want to extrapolate the concept that I mentioned earlier, manufacturing services, into agricultural services, where like you mentioned, we gave the example of AI or IoT. Even a large farmer may not have, while he may have 500 acres of land or 300 acres of land, he may not have the capital or the technology bandwidth to implement AI and IoT. Whereas a service aggregator like an Uber, if the same principles are applied for manufacturing and which is applied for manufacturing services that apply to agricultural services, will have the ability and the resources, both technology and capital, to provide those specialized services on a pay and use basis. Because the way the world is progressing and the way the technology is moving so fast, that ownership of any particular product or technology by any one individual is going to be difficult to sustain. Whereas a service provider, he can actually sweat that technology, 24 by 7 and recover his capital back in 2 or maximum 3 years and upgrade the technology. So I think that is going to be the way forward, and agricultural land holdings, which you have pointed out as an issue, is a great opportunity, for India.
Thank you, Mr. Sunil. Now we'll just have last 2 questions from that side.
Good afternoon, sir. My question is in the context of the challenge about increasing India's manufacturing exports. How can India maintain its cost competitiveness in the face of rising costs?
chemical residue or food safety which is associated with what we are growing here. And the local standards too have to keep in place. So the point to start is look at your local standards. For the domestic market itself, your standards have to start moving up and they have to be closer to what you see in some of the developed countries. Once you do that, you'll see that over a period of time, your supply chain also starts making the adjustments. So if you look at the latest FSSAI standards for so many products, they are actually in line with some of the better quality standards elsewhere. And while implementation leaves a lot to be desired, but over a period of time, as implementation gets strengthened, the whole governance mechanism around these standards or regulations improve, you will find that the local supply chain will start adjusting to that. So these are slow processes. A large country like India takes a little bit of time to adjust to this, but one can clearly see those changes happening. Those changes are happening in pockets, but for that to get replicated, propagated across will be a slow process. But India has a lot of markets. It's not only some of these very stringent markets that you have to look at. Look at Latin America as a market. It's a large market, and Latin Americans are waking up to the prospects of what they can actually source from India, right? And Indian companies are finding some very good, openings in those kind of markets. So it's not that you have to just restrict yourself to the traditional markets, which are EU and US. There's a whole world outside, outside the domain of these countries, and with a large population and with GDP growth rates which are better than these countries. So a combination of these approaches will help India get there, but it's a slow one.
Thank you. Mr. Ali, you know,
Just a small addition point, more of an anecdotal one. So I used to export grapes. Initially, when you export grapes, there was not such restrictions were put in. And slowly, as the Europeans started, and it became very modern retail specific criteria required. So if the value itself has got enough, play, then one would actually go ahead and implement those things. So we implemented those aspects. So the question becomes whether you want to tap those markets or not, whether you have the ability to tap those markets. And if you have enough spread, then automatically India also will definitely put in. It's not that we can't. Yes, we are elephant, we move slow, but when we move, we make an impact. €20 an hour. It's not like that. What the fundamental principle is, are you implementing your national standards? So if your national standards are prescribing a certain minimum wage, then they want to ensure that the factories are in compliance with that. If the national standards are requiring certain, insurance or healthcare facilities or creches or dormitories or whatever it is, they want to ensure that you are in compliance with your national standards. In India, the challenge that manufacturing has faced is that these standards vary from one state to the other states, including environment. Some states have got a ZLD, which is zero liquid discharge prescribed, and several states do not have the ZLD prescribed. So the foreign importing brands or clients are only asking for you to be in prescription or in compliance with your local, provincial or national standards. Not in compliance with their American or European or wherever they are from. Not in compliance with those standards. I don't know if this answers your question or not.
So I find it very interesting कि एक बंदा क्वेश्चन पूछता है और चार बंदे हम लोग आंसर. So that is the level of interest that we guys have, and I hope you guys catch up. Great, number one. Number two, आपने बात किया कार्बन क्रेडिट्स का, कहीं बीच में आपने बात किया कि बेस स्टैंडर्ड्स क्या होंगे, डिस्कस होंगे. So also personally, I see it as a great opportunity. the level of improvements which we can do in Indian agriculture and the level of how we can standardize that, or एक उसका agency होता है which is called MRV, which certifies the carbon credits. So if you are able to do it, there's a huge market for carbon credits which India can sell. So it's a huge amount of money which India can make, and that is something we should also look at.
Thank you. One last question from someone. Yes.
The challenge is that we don't respect water enough. So the question is, how do you make it respectful, right? I mean, we have, so they are still contemplating. There is no decision which was taken in the media paper. So I think that when you say commodity, it's not the question of the trading on an exchange platform. I think what they are trying to do is to ensuring that there is enough understanding and appreciation to pay for water. That is the direction which they are. Drop groundwater to irrigate their farm. They get license to draw a certain percentage of water. If they don't get a license, they cannot. Their farm may close down. Here we have, again an anecdotal in one of the projects which we are trying to work. We tried to give Punjab farmers metered motors. They refused. So it is, I think that's where we are coming from. We don't respect that natural resource. And I think Niti Aayog's paper, I read the executive summary sometime back. I think they are trying to address this issue. I'll comment to Vijay here. Very, very valid concern raised by you. Yes, in larger number of states, we are getting into a freshwater deficient kind of a situation. I personally feel that what the government has to take the initiative is, for me, whatever, I took pride in saying that I export 22 million tons of rice from India as a country. I take pride in saying that I export 6 to 7 or 8 or I don't know whatever that exact number of sugar exports. But I am telling you what we are exporting is the fresh water, because these two crops are the water guzzlers. They consume the maximum fresh water. The moment we bring down the production of these two commodities and increase the production of the oil seeds and a couple of other commodities, it will be a benefit to the freshwater resources sustainability. It will be a benefit to the what do you call the Indian government exchequer and many other things. That's my take on that.
Thank you. And I just as concluding thoughts, I think some very good questions have been asked, but overall, I think in India, when we have been discussing economics, we tend to forget that it is mainly driven by politics as well. So if we look at most of the commodities, 2009, 10, if we look at NCDEX, some commodities were banned at that point in time. Then something happened in 2015, something last year as well. So I think overall, what we probably need to create is something on the lines of US Department of Agriculture, where that specific authority is independent. Once those things start coming in, I think the rest of the things will automatically start falling in place. So that Thank you everyone. Thank you to all the eminent panelists and thank you to all the bright students here. And very special thanks to Dr. Ramsey sir.
We would like to extend our sincere gratitude to all the guests for joining us today and sharing their valuable insights about how trade as a pillar can be leveraged to shape the future of the nation. I'm sure that every one of us present here got to learn a lot from your profound knowledge. I would also like to thank everyone present here for being a wonderful audience and making this event a success. We would now like to present each of the guests with a token of appreciation from IIFT.
We request Ramsey sir and Nandhi sir to come.